Welcome back, selectors, to the Life Burst podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Tiffany.
Hi, I'm Andrew, and welcome to Las Vegas.
Welcome to Las Vegas. Welcome to the Life Burst podcast, live on what is it called? On location.
On location.
Super scuffed.
At the airport.
At the airport. We showed up super early for our flight back home, so we're taking this time to kind of give you a little post GP rundown while we're waiting for our flight. If we sound a little different, it's because I've got a little Zoom mic, and that's what we're currently recording on.
It's true. This is the ASMR podcast, and the fact that if you're wearing headphones, you can probably hear me in one of the channels and Tiffany in the other channel.
The other, yeah. Because I don't know, I'm not a big sound person. I'm really sorry. This is the best I could do.
This is our left-right podcast.
So if you hear some background noise, it's because we're at the airport. But today, first of all, fellow selectors, I just want to thank you all for commenting, liking, and subscribing with all the podcasts that we have done so far. It is really nice having you fellow selectors here with us.
It was also great meeting a ton of you guys at Vegas. If it's not a spoiler for anyone, we were here for the GP.
I don't think it's a spoiler. I think we spoiled this every single podcast leading up to this. Right.
So we were here at the GP. We did the Vegas GP, and and we're gonna talk to you about how we did, what our rounds look like, what the top 8 looked like, what we're thinking a little bit of the metagame looks like now, and then what's next for our channel. We'll be talking about some other stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But before then, Tiffany, how was your Vegas week?
How was our Wixoss week? Well, it was extremely exciting. So,
it's hot in Vegas.
It is so hot. It's so hot.
It is dry in Vegas.
It's so dry. Guys, I'm sorry. Maybe this is TMI, but I got a nosebleed. It's so dry here.
It's really, I'm just getting dust in my eyes constantly.
It is crazy hot. Actually, the day of the GP, it was 115 degrees outside, and I have to tell you, I'm so thankful we were just literally indoors all day.
Yeah.
From 9 o'clock in the morning until 8:30.
Yeah.
I think 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. We were inside.
Yeah, so we were at the Alexis Park resort hotel, mm-hmm. Which is a pretty cool resort that was had 3 different pool areas and lots of different places where people could be at the hotel. But we were at the main sort of event area in order to do it.
It's got a convention center part of it.
And I was really just expecting convention center ballroom. You open it up, it then has a bunch of tables, and then we'd play at it. But I was actually really surprised by all the things that were in it.
Actually, yeah, they did a pretty good job just setting up the atmosphere for Wixoss, which was, of course, they had these big giant long tables that had the printout numbers for each table, and the printouts were Wixoss themed, which is cool. But hanging up, they had these big tall posters of some of the center lyrics, which was cool. So if you wanted to, you could take a picture with Lion or Tamago or whatever. And I think that was really cool. But they also had a seller's table mm-hmm. that was selling Wixoss cards and singles, which is really great because sometimes stuff happens, or maybe your order didn't come in on time, so it's good to have that stuff on hand. They were also selling things like card sleeves, which we'll get into later why that was a great thing. Totally. And then one of the coolest things that they had was an art gallery that had pictures from the Diva anime blown up and printed out in high resolution
on canvas
and poster board, the thick foam poster board and stuff. And that was really cool because some of them were pieces, art from pieces, so you mm-hmm. could actually see it up close and really be able to appreciate the artistry that goes into the art behind the game, which I really appreciated.
Yeah. And outside of that too, the producer from Japan, Takara Tomy, was there, which was very cool that we got to talk to them.
Yes.
And was kind of cool. I actually wanted to just say, hey, thank you, for the game. Just saying, we support it over here in the English in the English content creation realm. And like listening to me, he was like, "Are you Life Burst podcast?" And I was like, "Are you kidding me?" "Yeah, I am." And he's like, "Oh, I've listened to your podcast." And I was like, "No way."
So hello.
And he said, "I saw your wife. She's got the lion hat." And I was like, "Yep." He was like, "That's awesome."
It was really cool meeting him and everybody that was there. And I think that it was the whole like what's it called? The whole event actually, I think, ran pretty smoothly.
Yeah, there was a couple hiccups in the fact that there was no real internet in the event hall, and it was hard to get reception. So the Best Coast pairing matchups were a little difficult, but they handled it really. I'm going to give them credit.
Yeah.
They handled it really well, saying, "You know what? Just come to the front, say what it is. We'll put it in directly." And they also had 2 different places where you could check your names on the board.
Like they printed it out and they posted it in the back of the hall. So if there was any sort of like confusion, they like physically posted like a printed out list. And to be fair, it was not very far to like just walk outside and get reception. And like, let's be honest, for those of you out there that have traveled and gone to card tournaments and or gone to conventions, how many times have you just not had cell reception? It's common, and
Par for the
there's
course.
Par for the course. And I do think that they handled it very well. I also the round timer, I think it was 40 minutes.
Yeah.
So
very visible.
Very visible. Like you could see it no matter where you were sitting, which I really appreciated. And they kept it going pretty smoothly. So honestly, this was a pretty great event in my mind. I mean, this is the first time that I have done any sort of like card game events or anything like this, and I had a really good time.
Yeah.
Speaking of meeting people, we met so many of you fellow selectors out there, and I have to tell you, it was so special. Thank you for coming up and saying hello to us and getting our special token cards and just talking with us and meeting with us, because like you guys make the card game like we all do, all us selectors together.
I gotta admit, it was the best comments that we got were things like, "I'm really busy, but your channel helps keep me going on Wixoss, so that way I can keep abreast of things, since I'm busy." Or the game was dying down a little bit for me, but I kept watching your podcast, and that was helping me stay in it. And really the best ones that we've gotten were stuff like, "I'm really busy and I don't have a ton of time to research decks. I love listening to your podcast on the ride home or while walking the dog, and I feel like I come back knowing stuff." And I will say this too. All of the people who said, "I've been listening to your channel for a while, about a couple months. It's helped me really stay sharp in the game." Those guys, all generally speaking, did a positive percentage matchup in their
Not
stuff.
to toot our own horn or anything. We're just really proud.
I'm just really proud of everybody who's like, "I've been studying and I got it. I got it."
Also, please drive responsibly, but I am more than happy to be part of your daily commute wherever you may be going. But yeah, that was really awesome. We also met a ton of people from the Discords that we're a part of. There were a lot of people there that were from Card Garden that was there. There were people that we had played with in the Diva, Selector circuit?
Yeah.
The Diva Selector circuit, the 3v3 matchups. We met Tama Anon, which was really cool.
Yeah. Huge shout out to Neat, who was the head judge. Hellfire for Dexys coming in clutch. The EU website has not been updated with being able to make the deck lists current. However, the Dexys website working beautifully. Dexys.app, by the way, guys, if you haven't checked it out yet. And also Tetris, who was also a judge and did a fantastic job as well.
Yeah, big shout out to you guys. Honestly, it was a really great event. I loved like meeting people. So now we're not just like internet card game friends. Now we're like IRL friends.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was really interesting only being able to recognize people via their voice.
Yeah. It was also kind of cool that I'd be talking to someone and someone would walk by and stop and then like give me the squint eye, and I'd be like, "Do you want a token?" And they'd be like, or you did the whole like someone would like be like, "Are you?" and be like, "Welcome, selectors."
I
And they,
did that. I did do that. Like, they were like, "Are you Tiffany from the Life First podcast?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I am." And they were like, "Oh, okay, yeah. I saw the MC Lion hat, and then I heard your voice, and it was having trouble clicking in my brain, and I was like, oh, let me help you out. Welcome back to the Life First podcast, a Wixoss podcast."
I'll get this one out of the way, so that way, if anyone's listening to this hasn't met me yet, is going to meet me at the, I guess there's a winter GP coming up now.
Spoilers. I mean, it's not spoilers. They announced
it.
But...
I am short, so you guys don't need to tell me when you meet me, "Oh, you're shorter than I thought you would be." That's fine.
We know.
I got it. We are short.
No, I think that's so funny. There's definitely people there that, like, were, you know, like, I don't know. Comment down below what my voice makes you think I look like. I'm curious now.
I hope me saying I'm short is enough that will I hope hold on one second. I hope that me saying I'm short is enough that people will think I'm like super short, like 2 feet tall now, and then someone will come up to me and be like, "You're taller than I thought you would be," and
wouldn't that be great?
That would be new. That would be new for me.
That would be new. Oh, God.
Speaking of us at the GB, how did we do?
Oh my goodness, how did we do? Well, I think I don't know if they posted anything publicly yet. I know that they will eventually, including everybody's deck list. But I placed 34th, which is fine.
Yeah, out of an event that capped off at 128 people. That's
good.
Yeah,
it capped at 128 people. And I placed 34th, and I probably could have broken into top 32s, but as many of you know that play Swiss, the breakers can be a little weird.
Yeah, with your numberage, you went 4-3. Still a positive matchup, which is really difficult at GPs, just in general. That you ended up, you could have been as high as 24th. With the amount of points that you got, but breakers be breakers.
Breakers be breakers. So I am not completely devastated by that. I do wish I could have broken into top 32. I was really hoping to break top 16, but I guess I'll just have to, keep playing, keep practicing, and we'll see where that goes in the Winter GP, wherever that might be.
One win could got you there, 5-2, so it's not unreasonable. Very close.
It was close, and all the games that I played were close, which was great because just like as like a let's just say it, like as a card athlete, let's call ourselves that, having good, challenging, close games makes the game really fun.
Yes.
Like, yeah, I mean, it's nice to kind of, I suppose it's nice to go in and just like completely like wipe somebody out. But at the same time, you want to be challenged as a player. Yeah. And I played some very, very good opponents.
Yeah.
Talking about you, Tommy, Bubble Person. That was one of the best matchups ever. I really, really enjoyed that matchup, but it was just full of good games.
Yeah. I did well. I topped 8, which was
congratulations.
Thank you. I was very excited to top 8.
Mm-hmm.
It's difficult to top 8 anything consistently. Mm-hmm. So being able to do top 16 consistently, top 8 consistently at the ceremonies, and then really putting in the work to pretty well top 8. I felt like I was in control of my top 8, yes. I should say.
Yeah.
That made me feel really, really good. I didn't get higher. I got 7th technically. So I couldn't place any higher than top 8. Due to reasons, and I'll talk about it when I get to my match breakdowns.
Sure.
But I'm just sort of like learning to pat myself on the back here for top 8. I'm a little disappointed I couldn't get any further, but because I really wanted it. But getting.
Who doesn't want to get first place?
I know. But I gotta admit, I've been thinking about it. I've been listening to a lot of Magic players talk about cracking top 8 and their frustration at not getting to like first place. Basically, all of them saying getting top 8 is a milestone on its own. You so rarely get the chance to hit first place that it's just getting top 8 is you need to accept the fact that after that it becomes almost Olympic-based luck that gets you the rest of the way.
It really is, and what's cool about the Best Coast Pairing app is that it like shows the breakdowns of like a lot of, let's call it like Olympic percentages. So it shows you your like accumulated points, but it also shows you like your win percentage. Is that what that is?
Yep.
So you can actually see like how well your opponents did, kind of like how the breakers actually break down according to certain percentages. And that kind of data is really valuable, especially for players like us, or should I say players like you, that love making like really in-depth analysis of their gameplay to improve their game.
Right.
And I have to tell you, your gameplay has improved a lot. You really, I just want to give you a shout out, like you really put in the hours, you put in the reps, you did the work, you did the homework, and I think it really shows.
I was not surprised by literally anything I played, which is a huge compliment on that front. And I'll talk about more when I get into my rounds. I'm going to be very brief about it. But hey, reveal, because people don't know what we played yet. I played Esper Tama. I wanted a deck.
Can you explain what Esper is?
Yeah, sure. So that's blue, black, white Tama. So it's a control deck. And I played that because I wanted a deck that was 50% against literally everything in the metagame, and then push my play skill hard enough to be like, all right, I can outplay people.
Right.
And that was 2 reasons for that. One, I genuinely think that's a good choice when you're doing a GP with many rounds. The second reason is because I needed to push myself as a player to grow and not just rely on good metagame scouting and deck building, because I like those 2 things a lot, but I've leaned on them as a crutch for a really long time, and I needed to get better as a player. So this is a good way to force myself to it. And getting to top 8 here shows that I did that, and I'm really proud of that.
Yeah.
Tiffany, what did you play?
So the deck I decided to go with for the GP is a mono white aggro deck with a Tama center and a Donna and Akino assist line. And the reason I actually did a lot of like soul searching, because as many of you know, I'm a very like feel it, sense it kind of player. I did a lot of soul searching to try and figure out how I can maximize my skills as a player, and for me that meant playing towards my strengths. And so I did a lot of time researching what decks I vibe with the most. And aggro is definitely one of them. I don't think that would shock any longtime listener of this podcast. But it was like, do I want to be a combo player? Do I want to take aggro? Do I want to try taking mid-range? Like, those are kind of the decks that I vibe with the most. Taking those into account, I had like a sit down with myself, and I'm like, okay, given that I am most inclined to use these archetypes, or archetypes. Archetypes?
Whatever. Yeah.
Whatever. Which one of these do I think I can maximize as a player, but also give me a very good chance at succeeding in the GP, given what the meta is currently? And after all of that testing and research and practice, I decided to settle with mono white Tama center, mono white aggro.
Yes.
And honestly, I'm very happy with my decision. I did a lot of reps with that, and I vibe very, very well with that deck. I'm very comfortable with it, and it's also fun to play for me. And I think that playing towards my strengths and then really putting in the work to practice with it, I think made me grow as a player, for sure.
Yeah, I also think it's on dumb deck, right? And I think you
no,
really...
it's not. It's really not.
You really big-brained a lot of it. You figured out, like, the ins and the outs of it. Yeah, a lot of it ended up being things like Remember's a strong card, but you also had tricks in there, like Donna popping out a Celestia, or popping out a Coella in order to defend on attacks and suddenly deny people strong attacks. You managed to figure out outs that were not normally there. Recently, you did a very cool one. I want to give you a shout out for your big galaxy brain here. You figured out a way to. You had to open up a certain lane, one lane basically, to win, and you were up against an opponent. I'll give him a shout out here, Altiers, where it was H2O was blocking the lane, and you were like, I think White Heaven can work if I target the same H2O twice. And you did, and it does follow. We checked; it follows the rules of Wixoss. You do the card as it's written. So you did the first thing where it bounces, and then the soul stops it, and then the second one trashes. And because it doesn't, soul, it didn't have a card under it because of the first effect. It then went to the trash, and you won the game from it.
And I did, yes. And I checked with the judge after, because I was like, hey, I'm pretty sure I read this correctly. I just want to make sure that I'm reading this correctly. And the judge was like, yeah, actually, because you would you would have a target, and then you would follow it as written.
Yep. So you put the research in, and it's not. And I think generally speaking, we found the meta fell into rock paper scissors, which was these sort of white or red aggro decks, very strong aggro decks that could push damage, but also be a little versatile. Were good against the Esper decks. The Esper decks were good against the these sort of like all-arounder decks, and then the all-arounder decks lost to the aggro decks.
Yes.
Generally speaking, and so we ended up seeing that pretty much almost come out correctly in the GP. But talking about the general GP things outside of our own decks now, there was a lot of sort of like just various aggro. I think the most highest performing various aggro deck was a white aggro deck.
Yes.
They sometimes didn't necessarily. The main deck was mostly all white. They sometimes didn't use completely white centers. Sometimes they would use red centers. Sometimes they use green centers. Sometimes they use an Esper centers. At top 8 inevitably had sort of a mono white aggro deck that used Esper centers and pieces. But generally speaking, I think the white aggro decks are the ones that I saw placing pretty high on the tables. The red aggro decks placed mid on the tables this time around, which I think is what we were expecting. Dash ended up, the highest ranked Dash player ended up, I think, 4-3. And that was sort of the way it worked. I asked Anthony, by the way, from Old Replay Works, what was the sort of thing that happened, and his answer was something of a mix of there was just sometimes the deck fell apart on itself, and that's just due to variance of how that deck runs. Other times he felt there was just Esper had the tools to beat it, and the tools were basically if they could deprive early damage. We're talking Lancelot, Hera, Ramel, those types of things. If they could wall up just early enough, it gives them an opening to win the game, which I found to be true as well. I ended up playing against a Dash Hirana, my round 1, and went, well, this is the matchup I was dreading, but we'll see if I could do it. And I walled up early game, and it did let me win.
Yeah. Shouts out to Anthony, though. He did end up winning the Hirana Sleepy. He was the top performing Hirana player at the GP. So congratulations. That's a big achievement.
Yeah. And there were some other people too playing Dash Hirana, not just shouting out Anthony, but others as well. And what we found, aside from the aggro, was there was various Esper builds. But the thing was, I was surprised how diverse the Esper builds were.
They were. I saw like 3 different builds, and they're all different. Yeah,
there was Tama control, there was Madoka control, I saw Tamago control, and I saw Aya controls. I even saw a few Deus controls. And all of those ended up performing pretty well. Various stuff. Like some of them were down at the bottom, and that's because the players I don't think were necessarily well versed on how to play those games. But they did okay. And I saw some people in the mid tables, and then there was a fair amount in the high tables.
Yes. The Esper was actually pretty spread. Yeah.
The other deck that did particularly well was Adam's decks. Which I don't think is super surprising, come to think of it. But we also had some surprise Japanese players playing.
Yes.
And inevitably, it was a Japanese 1 event. But it was Adams that came out on top, which doesn't surprise me too much. Adams is a really big deck in Japan. I don't think America was really all that good at playing against Adams, and was maybe taken surprised by it because it's not actually that popular of a deck in the US.
And that actually surprises me because we were like a hair away from taking double Adams decks for the GP. Like, that's actually what it came down to for like decision time. Like, what am I going to commit to as a player? And I committed to mono white, but I actually was very heavily considering taking an Adams deck.
Right. The reason I didn't take an Adams deck too was because how poorly it plays against Remember. Like, you play if you play Remember the 5th of November, and you throw those both those Remembers down, it's almost impossible for an Adams deck to win.
Yeah.
Which is what ended up happening in my round 5, I think it was, where I played against the Japanese player, and I played a Remember. I did all the steps correct, and I got burst, like just one burst at the very end to lose that, but I was very, very close to knocking him out of top 8 contention. And I know. It was just like I saw the burst happen and went, well, that's part of this game. It's a close game. You know, you can't when the game is literally 50-50 and a burst happens, you just go, yep.
Yeah. So speaking of that, should we get into kind of our like round play-by-plays?
Sure. I think
We'll go over these like relatively quickly, like our general feelings of them.
Yeah, so I'll do mine real
You
quick
wanna do yours
first.
first?
Yeah.
Okay, go for it.
So I ended up going round 1 against Dash, which is a fellow selector who listens to the Life Burst podcast. So shout out to you. I'm sorry I did not write names down or screen names down, so I'm not giving specific shout outs usually. But you know who you are. Comment down below. Give him a shout out. Tell him it's you. So I played versus Dash. It was a very, very close game, just like I thought. I did fish my wish at the very beginning when I Madoka'd into 2 Toyokis, which are 8Ks at level 1. I decided to play a Tama deck that was a little lighter on discard than I think a lot of the other Esper decks was, and a little lighter on field opening, which would come back to bite me in the butt later down the line. But I think the walling up, which is what I used to do with Nova, mind you, helped out a lot because I played against a lot of aggro decks, and walling up early really saved me a ton of damage. So I went against that. I did that. In the end, he Entwined Supremacied, attacked, burst one of my life cloth. It didn't have a life burst on it, so I was fine there, and then he attacked his normal attack, and it got me back a guard, and then I was able to be like, guard, cool, here, I survive. But it was really down to that guard. Luckily, if I hit any life burst that drew me a card, there was a guard on the top of my deck as well that I looked and saw. So I was very much controlled to win that game, but I needed to hit the correct life burst, and I did. Then round 2 was against a mirror Tama, but I won by preserving my life cloth. In the end, I just really, really stopped damage from coming my way because I knew that it was difficult for the opponent to kill me, and I was also doing a really good job at just not giving them enter. So when it came down to the Tama swings, I had more enter than he did, which means that I technically had more damage than him, and I was able to pull it off because of that. He did actually find me later down the round and was like, good job getting top 8, you pulled me up. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, I got top 32 because you pulled me up from the breakers. And I was like,
how breakers work.
I was like, cool, yeah, good for you. Round 3, I went against a DXM. I enter starved with the Remember tax a lot, which was a little dangerous because I wasn't necessarily... I had Exia in my hand, and I chose to play Remember instead. But it worked out. The tax actually helped me out there. Similarly, in Mono White, I actually set up a scenario where I was able to play Remember and do a double Remember tax. He guarded. He realized after he guarded it was a mistake, and then didn't have the enter to basically kill me off on the next turn. But we take those, that's how these high-level games play. One tiny overextension there could cost you, and inevitably did there. But it was all of these were really close games, guys. I barely won all of them. It's a tiny edge case. A collection of tiny edge cases gets you there. The next one was this DXM. And I got to be honest with you. Oh, no. Round 5 was against Atomic. This is my one loss that I had. So this is against the Japanese player. Again, it came down to a life burst. He hit a burst that basically removed a damage on my field, and I needed that specific damage to win in the window that I had. Because I didn't have that, he untapped and then managed to kill me out, and I didn't have enough life cloth preserved to stay there. Atomic does one thing very well, which is really, really, really push damage, and if you can't stop the damage, oh well, you're out of that game. The next round was round 6 against DXM. Actually, I should have lost that game. I'm going to be completely honest with you. The only reason why I won was a mistake on his part. He put the wrong soul on his Signy and moved to combat phase, did a couple triggers, and then saw, I put the wrong soul on there. I said, yeah, we can't go backwards. Mostly because we were down to 2 minutes left in the time. I'd have to call a judge over. The judge would have to sort of repair our board state, and then we both get a double loss. So I just said we have to move forward. And then because of that, it ended up being I was at 0 life cloth, but still alive. I swung for the win with my double Tama and some Remember support to make sure that I could tax, and I managed to win that game very, very barely. But again, that's sort of how all these games go towards the end of the tables. The next round was round 7 against Carnival, which is a crazy deck. Was not expecting to see Carnival round 7 at the high tables.
Yeah.
And this one I remember, it was Akadilin, by the way. And I realized I've played Carnival a few times, not enough to be super familiar with it, but Carnival basically has a lot of action abilities, and if you play Remember, you can really, really struggle bust them a little bit, so that helped. However, he had a way to get enter, so my Remember, while handicapping him, didn't make him completely fall over. However, I did keep his hand size low. I made a few mistakes. Could have kept it a little lower. I kept his hand size really low to really deny him a super great Carnival turns, and because of that managed to slowly but surely pull off the game. It also came down to a life burst at the very end. I did pull the life burst and it got me the win. But you played your outs, you know. So I made it into top 8 after that, and the next, I'll talk about the top 8 after you talk about your stuff.
Sure. Okay. So my journey is going to be a little bit different because I went 4-3 instead of 6-1, leading up to the cut to top 8. So I'll 100% admit that my first round was a little rough for me. I had a lot of first time GP, I'm very nervous, jitters. I went up against a Yuka, Deus, and Madoka deck with Yuka in the center, which was pretty interesting. I had never seen a I guess you could call it an Esper deck with that sort of center setup. So that kind of put me off a little bit. But what really did me in for that matchup, I lost. What really did me in for that matchup was I wasn't pulling any guards. I think I got one guard the entire game, which, as many of you know, is very rough on its own.
Yeah, and being a white aggro deck, it's you've got a little bit of maneuverability to filter your hand, but not a ton.
Yeah, and they weren't even in my trash. So I didn't even have a chance to Akino to get it back, to flip a what's it called, to flip a guard to get a guard back. There was just no possibility of me doing it. I also fell victim to discard very early, which ended up hindering me for the game. And because I was falling victim to discard, I felt rushed to pull a couple of my silver bullet triggers, such as my White Heavens or my Donnas early in the game, which was a very bad choice up against an Esper deck because I need to last just as long as they are. So I really needed to slow my roll on that round, and I didn't, and I lost. And that's okay. I should have lost that. I was making mistakes, whatever. Round 2 went a little bit better. This was one of my first wins in the GP, and it was a no-limit Ray Center Jules deck. It was very interesting. It was the first time I went up against a Jules deck, and I will say that I think it's the card Rubelite that I went up against, the one with the big syringe that says that if it becomes a target, then it vanishes Signes or whatever. I needed to get used to playing around that. I was able to adjust, and it got easier the longer I went into the game, because once you reach a level 3 in Tama, you can kind of ignore what the Signes are doing, because now you're just swinging over them, and you're just gonna bounce them, or you can start using your pieces to get rid of them because they're not vanishing. It's kind of like that. So let's see. I made a few mistakes, but I was able to bulk up to outlast the burn. So I basically treated that matchup like it was an aggro, because even though it was a Ray Center Jules deck, it was very, very aggressive on the front end. So I knew that I wasn't going to need to worry about my enter. It was just going to be given to me. So I just needed to make sure that I had sniper laser focused timing on my silver bullets to be able to win the game. And that ended up serving me very well. So for round 3, it was another win. I actually went up against an Adams deck. This was an Eldoria, Madoka, and Machina Adams deck, which was interesting. Again, this is my first time kind of going up against Eldora in an official setting, especially with Adams. I would have thought that people would have wanted to go with a Deus Center for that. So
that's the common theory for it. We actually talked about on the channel, not with you on there, but one of the deck tech I did for Eldora was an Adams deck, because Eldora really likes to see good life bursts, and Adams has great life bursts.
Yeah, so that was interesting to play against as well. But as soon as I saw the Adams building up in his life cloth, I knew exactly what I was going up against. So I was able to have a successful Akino on the H2O. So H2O's ability is only active on the opponent's turn. So using Akino to remove the H2Os from the field is a great way to set yourself up for success. After Akinoing the H2O away, I was able to set up for a 3-3-1 turn, and I swung for the win with a White Heaven after. So I was able to open up all the lanes pretty successfully. So I feel pretty good about that. Now, going into round 4, I think this is round 4. I might have gotten some of these like switched up, so I do apologize, because after round 3, things got very hard to take notes on in between rounds. So some of my notes are a little sparse, and I apologize for that. But I believe it was round 4 that I went up against one of my most favorite players, Bubble Person, who we've talked about before on this channel. He has just such a great like player attitude that like playing against him is so fun. He was playing a Tamago Center like blue control deck that was like kind of freezy and like kind of control-y, which he has been like workshopping for a very, very, very long time. And I have to tell you, this was a tough game. This was really, really hard. We were both like just completely in the zone playing the game, and eventually I did end up losing this round, but I gotta be honest, not even mad about it.
What were you playing against?
I just said a Tamago Center.
Yep, Tamago Esper.
Yeah, Tamago Esper. And it was a tough one. We both made mistakes on our end. I think I may have pulled some triggers a little bit too early. He actually targeted the wrong thing, so he was setting up for a mill with the Phalaris, and I had a Koella out on the field. I also had a Hestia out on the field, and he ended up removing the Hestia instead of the Koella. So when he swung with the Phalaris, my Koella just turned off its mill ability and got banished, which was fine by me because I had like 6 cards left in my deck. So no deck out for me. But you know, that's just it. That's kind of like what it comes down to, and I'm sure I made mistakes on my end as well. It was an incredibly close game. It was super fun. I loved this round, and I'm not even mad about losing. For round 5, I can't quite recall what my opponent was playing. I believe it was a Udith Center deck, probably like a mid-range kind of type. And the reason why I can't quite remember this one as well as some of the other ones is, again, like, it's getting really late in the day. Like, we're at round 5, and I had like no time in between rounds to like take notes. But I think my opponent was a little bit newer to the game, or maybe just not as confident as some of the other opponents I had gone up against. And, you know, right at the end, they ended up conceding. I just think that they weren't exactly quite happy with maybe how the tournament was going, which is a shame. I actually don't like winning 2 concedes because, you know, I would like to win because I win, not win because you concede. Let's see. For round 6, now this was an interesting one. For round 6, it was black, blue, white with, I think it was a Tamago Center. So another sort of Esper deck with a Tamago in the middle. And this round was interesting because, again, I think the player I was up against was maybe a little unfamiliar with some of the buzzwords in Wixoss. So we were kind of taking the game a little slow, which is totally fine. However, an interesting scenario came up that I had to call a judge for. I had a active Remember out on the field, and a turn before, they had played Garden of Singularity. So, for those of you unfamiliar, Garden of Singularity allows you to perform the action of guarding by discarding 3 cards from your hand instead of just discarding a guard. Which is great in certain situations. However, I have a Remember out on the field which says that when Remember is downed, the opponent has to pay 1 extra colorless to guard. So what my opponent had gotten confused on is, does that mean that she has to discard 4 cards or discard 3 cards and pay 1 from her enter or whatever? So, I was just like, you know what? I've never run into this situation, so we called a judge over, and Neat told us that in that scenario, it would be you discard 3 cards to guard, and then you pay an extra enter from your enter zone. And that was his ruling, which is kind of what I suspected as well.
Yep.
Unfortunately, though, that ate up a little bit of time in our round, and by the time that the judgment was over, we had 4 minutes left, and I did not want to double loss at all. Like, no one does, right? So I kindly just reminded her, I was like, hey, I'm not trying to rush you, but we have 4 minutes left in this round, so let's just kick it out, let's go. And I do believe that maybe if both of us had played a little bit faster, I actually really think I could have won that game, but that's just not how it turned out, so I unfortunately lost that game.
And that's like a little bit of a thing that you just learn from doing it, right? Like I was in actually one of my top tables, and a situation came up with Remember as well, and the opponent was confused about actually the wording because he thought only the center Signy has the tax on it, because the way that it's written is that your center Elrig and Signy, unclear that it's supposed to be your center Elrig and all Signy, right? Mm-hmm. So he was like, that's not how it works. And I was like, that's how it works. And he was like, I don't know. And I went, no worries, hold on 1 second. And I just immediately put my hand up, went, judge. And then as Neat was coming over, I looked back at him and I was like, to be clear here, I snap judged. It's not that I'm getting an argument with you or anything. This is the quickest way to resolve it.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's kind of what I told her too. I was like, look, I'm not familiar with this situation either. Let's just call over a judge and we'll get it figured out. I'm a little upset that I lost that round because I really think I could have won that one, but that's just the way it goes sometimes. Now, going into my 7th round, this is another win for me. I actually went up against a mirror matchup with a mono white aggro with a little bit of a control flare. It was a center Tama with a lion and an Akino assist, which is a pretty common divergence from the deck that I was playing. So I was playing a Tama Donna Akino assist line. It was a really interesting mirror matchup. I think we were both trying to kind of gauge the speed of one another. So I was trying to push damage early. That didn't quite work. So then I pulled back, but then they were pulling back too. So it was a really interesting, we're both looking at each other trying to figure out who's the beatdown. And in reality, it wasn't any of us. And I think if I had pushed the beatdown harder, because I am a very confident aggro player, I think I could have won that game faster. And this is another one of the rounds that actually ended up with my opponent conceding. And the reason for it, from what they told me, is that they had come here with a group of people and they wanted to leave and he was going to be leaving with them. So he asked me, he was like, all right, I'll just concede. And I'm like, are you sure you don't want to play this out? And he was like, do you have a card in your hand? And I'm like, yeah. And he was like, no, I'll just concede. So I probably did have the win. We were running a little low on time. I get it. It's a long day. So that ended up in a concede as well. But I do think I could have had the win if we played that out. Although that was, again, another very close game. But, when I go up against mirror matchups, I want to be the better player.
Yeah. I totally understand that. So that brings us to top 8, right? And the top 8 was as follows. We had, and this is in no particular order, but just to be clear, a Nova deck, which is an Uchu team, surprising everyone, by a pilot named Hannah, who was great, by the way. I just wanted to make clear, she was a little surprised she made it to top 8. She was a little shocked. She did a wonderful, wonderful job. And made it to top 4, so congrats to Hannah.
Congratulations!
I just want to give a huge shout out to her. Then we had Tama Esper, which was me. We had the Madoka Esper deck, which was one of our viewers named Lance. And then we had a Madoka Esper deck by another one of our viewers who I play quite often with at higher level sort of events, Pigeon.
Yeah, Pigeon's a great player. Great player.
And then we had a Tama aggro, and this one's the weird one that had Esper assists. Mm-hmm. This was Starfruit. He talked to me afterwards about his reasonings for it. It was all very solid reasonings to do it. Just basically a more solid Elrig line, a little more damage push you're able to do while simultaneously maintaining what's good about being an aggro deck itself. Mm-hmm. And then there was the 2 Deus Adams players from Japan, and then Dylan, who's also a viewer of the channel, who played the Carnival deck, which I played in round 4 or round 7. I played against.
Yeah. And if you would like us to reach out to any one of those American players, please let us know, and maybe we can set up an interview with them. I don't think we can interview the Japanese players, but we can try and reach out to Hannah and Starfruit, Pigeon, those guys, and see if they would like to have an interview.
Yeah, if you're the Japanese players listening, which it seems surprising, but a few of them said they knew of us. If you guys want to talk and have a translator, cool. We'll definitely do that too.
Yeah,
I know you guys don't
great.
speak a ton of English. So inevitably, I played against Hannah in the top 8. And our game went super, super, super long because, as it would, we're both stall decks. And she was playing Nova Uchinova. It's a deck I really, really know well in and out because I played it for the ceremonies back, and I got 5th place with it. But I knew that this was going to be really unfavorable to me because she's able to bring back guards for free every turn. I have to pay for it, and I also have to pay for my double attacks to try to outdamage her. Inevitably, it was a horrible matchup for me. I managed to salvage it and make it pretty close. But again, 2-hour game. Hannah managed to keep her concentration through it all. I barely kept my concentration there. I made a lot of mistakes.
Yeah.
But I lost narrowly. Lost the first game pretty handedly. Won the second game pretty handedly, just because I was like, I think I know the beats that I have to hit. I tried to hit the same beats in the third game. Didn't happen. And she inevitably sniped a guard out of my hand, and I was like, this is the damage math change, I'm not going to win the race now, because I would be able to deal 1 damage to her, she's able to deal 1 damage back, basically. And so it really came down to, does she have an extra guard in her hand? She did, and I lost that game. But great job for Hannah. She went on to top 4, and that's inevitably how it went. In the end, it ended up being to the 2 Deus Adams decks that played each other. And one of them came out on top.
That went so late. When you finally finished your rounds, we actually had a small interview with Tamanon afterwards, which was really nice. And when he inevitably posts that, if he posts that, then we'll of course link to that so you can take a look. But we all went out for Korean barbecue after because we were just so hungry. Like, everyone was starving.
Yeah, we wanted to hang out with you guys, too.
Yeah, we went to hang out with some fellow selectors and players and everything. So we went out to, Korean barbecue after, which was great. And we were out for a long time. We were out for a while. We really took our time. There was a ton of food. We're starving. We've had, maybe 400 calories that day. You know how it goes. And when we got back, it was 10:30, 10:45, and the top 2 placements had just finished. Just finished. I mean, it is a long day, 13-hour day. Crazy. So I'm not sure that they will be doing a best of 3 matchup in the upcoming GP. I'm not sure if they're going to be changing that. Quite frankly, I hope that they do, but I understand the reasoning behind it.
Yeah, I agree. It was a slog because of that. I will say this. If you guys want to keep... if we want competitive integrity, which I totally understand is a good reason for best of 3, and I get it, then it needs to be 2 days. It just needs to be a 2-day event then, so that way we can give some break between it.
I think it would be really nice to break it up into 2 days as well, because I would like to be able to watch, the top 8 games, and be able to cheer you on, but I wasn't allowed to really be near you because it was going to be distracting. So I would have liked it to be a 2-day event just so that we could get our groups together and go watch people and cheer for them, and then everybody would have had a good sleep and would have been a little bit more on the ball with their plays, and I think it would have made better games for it as well. But I also understand that, event planning is very difficult and expensive, and booking a place for 2 days can be very expensive, and sometimes the bottom line doesn't make a whole lot of sense for that. But maybe that'll change in the next GP.
Speaking of the next GP, what's next for us? Well, there's a Winter GP announced.
Yes.
There's a Winter GP that's announced. We do not know where yet. I'm hoping East Coast.
Please be East Coast this time.
But what's next for the channel here, we're going to do... the next video probably coming out is probably going to be a tier list. Get you guys updated with it. I'm going to publish all the decks that we were using for testing on Dexus, so you guys can search the link that'll be in the description and go ahead and see what decks basically are the top decks that you could be playing right now. I'm going to also upgrade those a little bit and talk to some of the players that we played against to get that. Following that, there's going to be some new deck tips. We're going to be talking about the deck techs with the top 8 people. Again, if you guys want to do an interview with me, just shout out. You've got my Discord. You guys know who you are. And then I'm going to talk about some new brews. There's actually 3 different brews that I came up with that I think are worthy of being top tier.
Yeah,
and
spicy brews.
No one's really playing with. Again, the only reason we didn't play these is because they didn't fit into Tiffany's playstyle or my choice of wanting a 50% deck. But those 3 decks, just to give you a sneak peek, if you're still here, is there's a Dash Tama. Not Dash Tama, excuse me. Dash Lion, Endless Punchline. That's really good, but is just like kind of high rolly.
Yeah.
There is a Pure Luke Madoka control deck, or not control deck, excuse me, aggro deck that plays really well and just never lets your opponent have guards. That kind of slices down that Esper meta and cuts it really deep. But it loses to like some of the mid-ranger decks. And then there is a Tama mid-range deck. Sorry, Tamago mid-range deck, which I know you're thinking, well, that's blue-black. No. This one was basically Ancient Surprise updated. It runs Tama. It runs red, so X, and it also runs Mel, which is green. So it ends up being a green-red-blue deck that just like shoulders through the opponent's defenses to win the game.
So that's what we've got coming up. If you guys would like to keep up with us for some of our next videos, we'll restart some of our versus videos as well. Maybe we'll do our GP decks versus each other versus video. If you guys want to see that, please make sure that you comment, like, and subscribe. You know, we love reading all of your comments. We'd love to hear from you. And we thank you for all of your ongoing support for the Life Burst podcast and for being just amazing fellow selectors. And of course, may you always flip a Life Burst.
Bye, guys.